She slid the folder across the kitchen table like she was closing a business deal. No eye contact, no warning, just a pale blue cover with a paperclip and my full legal name typed at the top. "Sign this," she said, "and we can avoid making things difficult." I looked at the words on the first page. Voluntary agreement to limit contact. I read it again. My daughter had typed up a legal document asking me to stay away from my own grandchildren. She was standing by the counter with her arms folded, waiting. My son-in-law sat at the far end of the table, staring at his phone like he was somewhere else entirely. I looked at my daughter, the same girl I had stayed up with through 3 ear infections, through a broken wrist in 6th grade, through a heartbreak sophomore year that made her cry until she couldn't breathe. She wouldn't meet my eyes. 67 years. That is how long I have been trying to be the kind of woman who leaves things better than she found them. 31 of those years as a nurse, the kind of work that asks more than it gives back, and still you do it because some people were made to show up. I showed up. That was always my answer to everything. Show up, stay steady, don't ask for thanks. And now, my daughter wanted me to sign something that said I would stop. It didn't begin like this. Of course it didn't. Nothing this painful ever announces itself. It sneaks in through the side door wearing the face of something reasonable. When my daughter and her husband bought their house 3 years ago, I helped with the down payment. Not a loan, I made that clear. A gift. I sold my car, pulled from my retirement savings, and wired the money the same afternoon she called to say they were short. I didn't ask for a plaque. I just wanted them to have a home. I moved to the same town 8 months later. Not next door, not even the same neighborhood. A small apartment about 12 minutes away, close enough to help, but not so close they could feel me breathing. I thought I had read the room. I brought groceries sometimes. I offered to take the children on Saturday mornings so they could sleep in. I came to school pickups when my daughter was running late. I showed up, the way I always had, the way I thought mothers were supposed to. But somewhere in the middle of all that showing up, I became too much. I know now there were signs. The way my daughter would tighten slightly when I walked in carrying a bag of things they didn't ask for. The way my son-in-law would excuse himself from the room within minutes of my arrival. The way conversations became shorter, warmer only when they needed something, then cooler again once it was done. The first time she said it plainly was about 11 months ago. She called me on a Wednesday evening, voice careful and measured, like she had rehearsed it. "Mom, we need you to pull back a little." I remember standing in my kitchen, the pasta I was boiling starting to go soft. I said, "Of course." I said I understood. I said whatever she needed. I cried after I hung up. Then I wiped my face and poured the pasta out and told myself it would get better. It didn't get better. The calls got shorter. The visits became scheduled, formal, 30 minutes with the children while my daughter hovered nearby folding laundry that did not need folding. My grandson Oliver would run to me when I arrived, but then he would look at his mother first, like he was checking whether it was allowed. He was 8 years old and already reading the room better than most adults I knew. Then came the document on the kitchen table. I did not sign it that night. I asked my daughter if we could talk about it, and she said there was nothing to talk about. I asked my son-in-law if he had anything to say, and he looked at his phone again. I picked up the folder, thanked them for dinner I had not been offered, and drove home in the dark. I sat with that folder on my lap for a long time in the parking lot of my apartment building. The streetlight buzzed overhead. Someone's dog barked from a second-floor window. I read the document again, slower this time. Paragraph 3 said I had caused emotional distress through repeated unsolicited contact. Paragraph 5 said, my presence was disruptive to the household dynamic. Paragraph 8 asked me to agree to no more than 1 supervised visit per month, subject to their approval and scheduling. Supervised, like I was a risk. I thought about Oliver, about the way he told me every detail of his science projects, every plot of every book he read, every worry he carried that he couldn't put into words for anyone else. I thought about Sophie, 5 years old and still small enough to fall asleep in my arms during long car rides. I thought about what it would mean to see them once a month, if they approved, if it fit their schedule. I did not sleep that night. I reorganized my kitchen cabinets at 2 in the morning because I needed to do something with my hands. On the third day, I called my friend Carol. We had worked together at the hospital for over 20 years. She in radiology, and I in the cardiac unit, and she was the person I trusted most in the world after my children, maybe more. She listened to everything without interrupting, which is a rare gift. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "They're asking you to sign away your grandchildren like they're a subscription you can cancel." I said yes. I suppose that is what they're doing. She said then don't sign anything, and find a lawyer by Friday. I took her advice. The lawyer's name was Miss Whitfield. Her office was on the second floor of a brick building near downtown, and she had a collection of small glass birds on her windowsill that caught the afternoon light in a way that made the room feel gentler than it probably was. She wore reading glasses on a chain, and she did not speak slowly at me the way some people do when they assume older women need things simplified. "Tell me everything," she said. So I did. She read the agreement my daughter had prepared. Then she set it down and said, "This is not legally binding unless you sign it, and even then it has significant limitations." She explained that grandparent visitation rights varied by state, that the document was designed to look more official than it was, that its main purpose appeared to be establishing a paper trail. My daughter had done her research. I had to give her that. "What do you want out of this?" Miss Whitfield asked me. "I want to be in my grandchildren's lives," I said. "Not every day, not as a disruption, just as their grandmother." She nodded. "Then we need to respond formally," she said. "Not with accusations, just with documentation and presence." I thought about what presents had cost me so far. Then I thought about Oliver checking his mother's face before running to me. I thought about Sophie, who once told me I smelled like warm. I said, "Let's respond." When I got home that evening, there was a folded piece of paper tucked under my door. Small, irregular, torn from a spiral notebook with the fringe still attached. I knew the handwriting before I unfolded it. "Grandma, Dad said you might not come on Saturdays anymore." I told him that's dumb. Mom looked mad. "I'm not supposed to write you, but I didn't want you to be sad. I drew you something on the back. It's a nurse because that's what you were and you saved people. I love you, Oliver." On the back was a pencil drawing of a woman in scrubs with a stethoscope, arms out wide, a sun in the corner with rays that took up half the page. I held that piece of paper, and I stood in my hallway, and I did not cry. Something else happened instead. Something quieter and more certain settled into my chest. The kind of feeling you get when you know you are not done yet. 3 weeks later, my daughter called. Her voice was different. Not warm, but tighter, controlled in the way people get when they know they have pushed something too far and cannot admit it yet. She said she had heard I had retained a lawyer. I said yes. She said she thought that was an overreaction. I said I thought a contract removing me from my grandchildren's lives was an overreaction, so perhaps we were even. She was quiet. Then she said, "Mom, we're not trying to hurt you. We just need structure." I said, "A phone call would have given us structure. A conversation, even a difficult one. What you gave me was a document." She said she and my son-in-law felt like I never respected the boundaries they set. I said I had tried. I said I had called before coming, pulled back on the visits, stopped bringing food without asking. She said it still didn't feel like enough. I asked her what enough would look like. She didn't have an answer. That was the moment I understood the real problem. It wasn't my behavior. Not entirely. It was that, no matter how much I adjusted, the line kept moving. Because the line was never really about behavior. It was about something she couldn't name yet. I let her go. I said I would see her in the hearing. The week before the hearing, I received a letter from Oliver. He must have had help with the address, or used an old envelope he'd found, because the handwriting on the outside was more careful than usual, like he'd been concentrating hard. Inside, a single sheet. "Grandma," Sophie asked, "where you were at her birthday party." I told her you were busy, but I don't think that's true. Are you okay? I found the necklace you gave me in my drawer. I'm keeping it safe. I'm going to tell the judge you're nice if they ask me. Dad said they won't ask me, but I wanted you to know anyway. I wrote him back that same evening. I told him the judge didn't need his testimony, but that it was the kindest offer anyone had made me in months. I told him to keep the necklace and that I was okay, and that none of this was his job to fix. I told him I loved him and that some storms pass faster when you stop trying to outrun them. I mailed the letter, and then I sat on my porch in the dark for a long time. The neighborhood was quiet. Someone 2 houses down had put up an early wreath. There was a smell of wood smoke and cut grass, and the particular stillness that comes right before a season changes. I was not scared of the hearing. I want to say that clearly. I had sat with patients in their last hours, had steadied people through news no one should have to receive, had worked double shifts in an understaffed unit, and gone home and come back the next morning. A family courtroom did not frighten me. What frightened me was the possibility that I would walk in there and my daughter would look at me across a table and see nothing but the problem she had made me in her mind. The hearing room was smaller than I expected. Clean, neutral. The kind of space designed not to favor anyone. My daughter arrived with my son-in-law and a woman I assumed was their attorney, younger than I expected, with a sharp bob and a leather folder. My daughter glanced at me when she sat down and then looked at her hands. The magistrate was a man somewhere in his 60s with reading glasses he kept taking on and off. He had a calm, unhurried manner, the kind that comes either from wisdom or from having seen too much of the same thing to be surprised by any of it. My daughter's attorney spoke first. She was precise and polished. She described a pattern of unwanted intrusion, a mother-in-law who disregarded parental decisions, who arrived without notice, who undermined household rules, who created an atmosphere of tension that affected both adults and children. She used the word boundary 11 times. I counted. She did not mention the down payment. She did not mention the Saturday mornings I spent at the park so my daughter and her husband could sleep. She did not mention the night I drove 40 minutes in the rain because Sophie had a fever and they were both scared and didn't know what to do. Then Miss Whitfield spoke. She did not raise her voice. She placed our documentation on the table, a timeline, records, a letter I had written to my daughter 6 months ago asking her to tell me specifically what she needed from me so I could do better. The letter had never been answered. Miss Whitfield asked me if I wanted to address the magistrate directly. I said yes. I stood. I looked at the magistrate. Then I looked at my daughter. I have been a nurse for 31 years, I said. I know what it looks like when someone is in pain and doesn't have the words for it yet. I know what it looks like when someone pushes help away because they are afraid of what needing it means. I have seen it in patients, and I have made my peace with it because that was my job. I paused. But she is my daughter, and those are my grandchildren, and I am not a problem to be managed or a habit to be broken. I am the woman who was there for every hard thing in her life before he was in it, and I will be there long after every document she writes today has been forgotten. I looked at my daughter when I said the last part. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes were wet. She looked away. The magistrate let the room breathe for a moment. Then he looked across the table at my daughter and said, I have one question for you. In your filing, you indicate that your mother's contact has been emotionally harmful to your children. Can you describe specifically one instance where a child expressed distress about their grandmother's presence in their own words? The room was quiet. My daughter opened her mouth. She looked at her attorney. She looked at my son-in-law. She looked at her hands. She could not answer. Because there wasn't one. The children had never said they were hurt by me. The children ran to me when I arrived. The children wrote me letters in secret because they missed me. She knew it, and now everyone in that room knew it. The magistrate said he would review and respond in writing. He thanked both parties. He left. My daughter walked out without speaking to me. My son-in-law paused near the door. For the first time in a long time, he looked at me like a real person. He looked like he wanted to say something, and then thought better of it. He nodded, just slightly, and followed her out. Miss Whitfield said, You were remarkable in there. I said, I was just honest. She said, That's usually the same thing. I went home and changed into comfortable clothes and made tea and sat by the window watching the neighborhood go about its afternoon. A man walked his dog. 2 kids rode bikes. Across the street, someone was raking leaves that would blow back before morning. The ruling came on a Tuesday in a plain envelope, brief and clear. The request for a formal contact limitation agreement had been denied. The magistrate noted that the evidence presented did not establish that the grandmother's contact had caused harm to the minor children, and that in fact existing documentation suggested the opposite. He recommended family counseling as a constructive path forward. He used the word grandmother 4 times. I noticed that. I called Carol. She said, "I want to say I told you so." I said, "You may." She said it loudly and laughed. I did not hear from my daughter that week. I did not hear from her the week after. I began to understand that the silence was not going to break on its own. So, I let it be. I watered my plants. I went back to volunteering at the hospital auxiliary on Thursday mornings. I found Oliver's drawing of the nurse and had it framed. I hung it on the wall next to the window where it caught the light. One evening, about 3 weeks after the ruling, a folded note appeared under my door again. But this time it wasn't Oliver's handwriting. It was smaller, rounder, with the letters done carefully the way young children write when they are trying very hard. "Grandma, I miss you." Sophie drew a picture, and it was a heart with 2 stick figures inside it, and underneath she had written our names, hers and mine, connected. I held that small piece of paper a long time. Then I framed that one too. The following Saturday, my phone rang. My daughter's number. I answered. Her voice was quieter than I had heard it in years. Not the careful, controlled quiet of someone managing a conversation. The quiet of someone who had put something heavy down and was still feeling the absence of the weight. She said, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to just listen for a minute." I said, "All right." She said, "I've been in therapy for 6 weeks. I started after the hearing." She paused. "I didn't go in to talk about you. I went in to talk about feeling like I was disappearing. Like no matter what I did with the kids, with the house, with everything, it wasn't enough. Like they always looked for you. And I was just the person who was there in between. I stayed quiet the way Carol had taught me years ago. Let the room hold things." She said, "My therapist asked me to describe a time when I felt like a good mother. I couldn't think of one that didn't somehow involve your help. I closed my eyes." She said, "I don't know how to undo what I did. I know I can't. I just wanted you to know that it wasn't really about you. It was never really about you." I said, "I know." I think I knew for a while, but I didn't know how to say it without it sounding like an accusation. She made a sound that was almost a laugh. "How are you?" she asked. And she said it the way she used to when she was young, when she called me from college on Sunday nights and actually wanted to know. I said, "I am all right." I said, "I miss the kids." She said, "They miss you too." Oliver asked if he could call you. I said, "Please tell him yes." He called that night. He talked for 45 minutes without stopping, about his science fair project on weather patterns, about the book he was reading, about how Sophie had eaten a crayon, and it had been a whole thing. He said, "Grandma, are you coming to my game on Saturday?" I said, "If it's okay with your mom and dad." He said, "I already asked." Mom said yes. I sat with the phone in my hand after we hung up, and I thought about how sometimes the things that feel like they are ending are actually just changing shape. My son-in-law called the next morning. His voice was careful, but not cold. He said, "I want to apologize. I've wanted to say that for a while. I let things go further than they should have, and I kept telling myself it wasn't my fight, and it was." He said, "You were never the problem. I think we were both scared of something we didn't know how to name." I said, "I appreciate that more than you know." He said, "Oliver made me listen to him talk about you for an entire car ride last week." I said, "I know," he told me. He laughed. A real one. The game was on a gray Saturday morning, the kind where the sky can't decide. Oliver played midfield and he was all elbows and enthusiasm and not a lot of technique, which made it the best possible thing to watch. Sophie sat next to me on the bleachers and shared my hand warmer without asking, like it had always been hers. My daughter arrived a few minutes late. She sat one row behind me. We didn't speak right away. We watched the game. Oliver scored a goal that was partially luck and partially heart, and he looked into the stands immediately, not at his parents first. At me, I waved. He waved back with his whole arm, grinning. My daughter saw it. She didn't look away. At halftime, she moved down to my row. She sat beside me with the careful deliberateness of someone who has rehearsed a small act of courage. We watched Sophie reorganize the contents of my purse, without permission. We didn't talk about the document. We didn't talk about the courtroom or the lawyer or the months of silence. She said, "Oliver has been sleeping with the drawing you sent him under his pillow." I said, "I heard." She said, "I hated that. Not because of you, because it meant I had made him feel like he needed to hide love." I said, "He'll remember that we found our way back. That's what will stay with him." She nodded. She looked like she wanted to say more and wasn't ready yet. That was all right. I had waited this long. I could wait a little more. Oliver's team lost the game by 2 goals. He was not remotely bothered. He came running over afterward, cleats clattering on the pavement, and he looked at me and then at his mother sitting beside me, and something moved across his face that I recognized. Relief. The deep kind, the kind children carry when the adults they love are finally in the same place at the same time and not making it hard to breathe. He said, "You both came." I said, "Of course." He looked at his mother. She opened her arm and he went into it. Then he reached back and grabbed my hand without looking, the way children do when they are secure enough not to need confirmation, and held on. I thought about all the years of showing up, the ones that were thanked and the ones that weren't, the ones that were welcomed and the ones that cost me. I thought about the document on the kitchen table and the courtroom and the months I spent watering plants and framing drawings and writing letters to children who had to hide the fact that they loved me. And I thought, this is still worth it. Even the broken part. Because here we are on the other side of it, and my granddaughter is asleep against my arm, and my grandson is still holding my hand, and my daughter is looking at me like she is finally seeing the shape of what she almost lost. We didn't fix everything that afternoon. That would be too easy and too fast and not how real things work. But we began. That's the word I keep coming back to. We began again, without lawyers this time, without paperwork, without a room full of fluorescent lights and careful language, just a bleacher and a gray sky and a little boy's hand in mine. That was enough to start. If this story found you today, it found you for a reason. You might know exactly what it feels like to be pushed out quietly, to have your love reclassified as too much. You might be the grandmother eating alone at a table set for one, or the mother who hasn't been invited in weeks, or the person who keeps showing up even when showing up costs everything. You are not invisible. You are not too much, and you are not finished. If this meant something to you, leave a comment below and share it with someone who needs to hear it. We'll see you next time.